Imagine being born into this world, knowing your very existence is a catastrophe. From the moment you enter the world, you are a disappointment, a living nightmare, and everyone around you is horrified. Such was the life of Charles II of Spain, the last Habsburg monarch, whose mere birth sent shockwaves across Europe, marking the beginning of the end for Spain's nearly 500-year reign. Charles II was born on November 29, 1661, at the Madrid Palace to King Philip IV and his wife, Mariana of Austria. He was delivered via C-section, after his mother had been in labor for 17 hours. And from the moment he was born, he was already losing. Charles II was born with an extremely large jaw, rendering him incapable of speaking or chewing properly. He was profoundly frail, unable to nurse, and would likely never walk. He suffered epileptic seizures and other symptoms that would become more pronounced as he grew. Everyone around him understood that Charles wasn't just ill, he was profoundly damaged goods. Why? Because Charles's parents were first cousins, as were most of their ancestors for 4 generations. You see, the Habsburgs were notorious for marrying their cousins. Why? Because they believed that doing so kept the royal blood pure. But what they didn't realize was that this seemingly noble goal was actually turning them into mutants. Now, some of you may be thinking, come on, that can't possibly be true. People do that sort of thing all the time. So why did the Habsburgs turn into monsters? Well, to put it simply, because they did it way too much. As the Habsburgs repeatedly married their cousins, they essentially sealed their fate. Each marriage further diluted their already compromised gene pool, accelerating their eventual downfall. The fact that Charles was even born alive was almost a miracle in itself. By the time his father, Philip, took the throne in 1665, the Spanish Habsburgs had been practicing cousin marriage since the 15th century, and the results weren't pretty. Charles's grandfather, Philip III, was so obese he was largely confined to his bed. His grandmother, Queen Anna, couldn't bear children and had to watch helplessly as her niece Isabella took the throne instead. And that's not even mentioning Charles's uncle, who died at age 29 without any surviving children. You get the picture. By the time Charles was born, the Habsburgs' genetic deck was already thoroughly stacked against them. Their bodies were decaying, their minds were fracturing, and their bloodline was on a collision course with extinction. Now, you might be wondering, surely someone noticed this trend, right? Like, come on, surely someone thought, wait a minute, we shouldn't be doing this, right? Well, yes, some people did notice, like King Philip's older brother, who begged their father not to marry Charles and Anna together, warning that their shared genes would ruin the family line. But unfortunately, the warnings went unheeded, and so Charles was born into a world that not only despised him, but also had a hand in his suffering. When Charles was just 6 days old, his father gave orders for him to be baptized in secret, fearing the impact his son's condition would have on the ceremony. After all, who wants to watch a bunch of priests sweating profusely trying to baptize a mutant baby with a C-section scar, an abnormally large lower jaw, and the inability to suckle, speak, or control his bowels? Not exactly the image one would associate with a holy event. But there was a problem. Despite the secrecy surrounding the baptism, word got out about the new king's condition, and people started whispering. Many wondered if Charles was even truly the king's son. Some believed he was the result of an affair between the queen and one of the servants. Rumors spread like wildfire, leaving the royal family in turmoil. With whispers growing louder, King Philip and Queen Mariana knew they had to take action. They summoned a group of 15 doctors and ordered them to diagnose their son. The doctors were baffled by the child's condition. They had never seen anything like it, but they couldn't afford to admit that. To do so would be professional suicide, and so they concocted a plan. They claimed that Charles had a rare condition called hydrocephalus, meaning his head was filled with water. They blamed this on a botched circumcision, saying the procedure removed too much skin, causing an imbalance of fluids in his body. The king and queen bought it. Over the next few years, the doctors performed procedures to drain the supposed excess water from Charles's head. But the treatments did little to improve his condition. If anything, they made it worse. But the royal family didn't want to hear that. They were desperate for a positive narrative, and the doctors were happy to oblige. As Charles grew up, the court went into overdrive to hide his condition from the public. Artists were commissioned to paint flattering portraits of the young king. Musicians composed triumphant marches in his honor, and playwrights wrote comedies celebrating his life. Meanwhile, those who saw the real Charles were stunned. In 1673, Jean Chapelain, an ambassador from the court of King Louis XIV of France, visited Charles. He was shocked by what he saw. According to Chapelain, the king had moments of lucidity, during which he seemed perfectly normal. But these were quickly followed by seizures that would render him motionless for hours. Then he would seem recovered and go about his business until the cycle started again. This back and forth left Chapelain baffled and concerned about the stability of the Spanish Empire. Charles's condition was a ticking time bomb, and his counselors knew that if the truth came out, the entire royal edifice could crumble. And so they lived in a world of make-believe. They proclaimed that Charles was a brilliant strategist, a gifted musician, and a man of great charm and wit. All the while, The real Charles struggled to walk and drooled incessantly. By the time Charles ascended to the throne in 1665, his counselors were masters of deception. They concealed his wheelchair with carpets, hid his drool with specially designed collars, and arranged for him to appear in public only when the light was dim. They even coached loyal subjects into thinking the king's strange movements and noises were signs of great wisdom and power. But perhaps the greatest deception of all was reserved for Charles's two wives. Both women were chosen not because the king loved them, but because they could produce an heir. The first marriage was to Louise Marie de Bourbon, who had, you guessed it, the same condition. The marriage was a disaster. Neither Charles nor Louise Marie could consummate the relationship, and the whole ordeal was a humiliating reminder of the Habsburgs' doomed lineage. After Louise Marie died under mysterious circumstances, Charles married Maria Anna of Neuburg. Again, the match was politically motivated and personally disastrous. Once again, Charles proved unable to consummate the marriage. No surprise there. And once again, rumors spread like wildfire, damaging the reputation of both the king and the dynasty. With no legitimate heir to secure the future of the Spanish Habsburgs, it was clear that the clock was ticking. Charles's health continued to deteriorate, and his bizarre behavior became more erratic. He started having violent mood swings and would remain motionless for hours on end, staring blankly into space. His counselors blamed everything but the truth. They said the king was overworked, needed more rest, or was simply bored. But the reality was far more sinister. Charles too suffered from the full-blown effects of extreme inbreeding. His body was breaking down, his mind was unraveling, and his dynasty was on the brink of extinction. He experienced the worst of both worlds, trapped in a body that betrayed him, and a mind that couldn't escape its prison. By the late 1690s, Charles's condition had become unbearable. He suffered constant seizures, drooled uncontrollably, and couldn't walk without assistance. His counselors, desperate to find a solution, turned to holy water, exorcisms, and accusations of witchcraft. They believed that the devil himself must have possessed the king, causing him to behave in such a manner. On July 1, 1700, Charles II died at the age of 38. His death triggered a succession crisis that led to the War of Spanish Succession, which dismantled the Spanish Empire and redrew European borders. In a twisted irony, the man who had been born a living nightmare ended up creating one for everyone else too. Charles II's story raises several disturbing questions about the nature of power, the abuse of hereditary privilege, and the cost of ignoring science and logic. Here's one. How does a person with such obvious limitations become king? Well, in short, through sheer force of tradition. You see, Charles was next in line because of his birth order, not because of his capabilities. In fact, throughout history, there have been countless examples of monarchs who ascended to the throne despite lacking basic mental or physical capabilities. Think King George III of England, who went insane and spent the last 16 years of his life wandering around Windsor Castle muttering incoherently. Or King Edward VIII of England, who abdicated the throne after just 326 days because he could unhandle the pressure of being a constitutional monarch. These cases, along with Charles II's, highlight how hereditary monarchy often prioritizes birthright over ability, sometimes with disastrous results. But here's another question. Why do intelligent people support hereditary monarchy? You see, the concept of divine right of kings held that monarchs were appointed by God, and therefore, their right to rule was unquestionable. In the case of Charles II, his counselors genuinely believed that he was the chosen one, destined by God to lead Spain to greatness. This unshakable faith in the divine order of things prevented them from considering alternative forms of government or questioning the abilities of their hereditary monarch. And finally, what makes Charles II's story especially fascinating is the way it encapsulates the decline of an empire. You see, the Spanish Empire was once a global superpower, stretching from North Africa to South America. But by the time Charles II took the throne, it was already on the decline. His reign marked the final collapse of this once mighty empire, making him a kind of tragic symbol of its fall. In conclusion, Charles II of Spain stands as a haunting reminder of the destructive nature of unchecked hereditary power and the importance of confronting inconvenient truths before they grow into catastrophic ones. His life serves as a testament to the fallibility of human judgment and the perilous consequences of sacrificing reason at the altar of tradition and dogma.